Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. Well, welcome, James Gregory, to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs. Right off the bat, we know you're not a woman, but you and I had a pre-call a few months ago, actually, and I thought that your story was great. You have a really interesting background from corporate businessman to now author. I think you've got a big story that is shareable to any audience. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation today. I'm going to hand the floor over to you. Give us a little bit of a backstory and we'll take it from there.
Lynette, it's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me on your show. And yes, I'll jump right in. The most important thing to tell you is that I met my wife a long time ago in New York on a subway on a rainy night. We were both 23 years old. You can tell I'm slightly older than that now, but pouring down rain, and I offered her my umbrella, and that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship. We got together for lunch. We talked about our different paths. She was working on Wall Street. I was struggling with trying to be a graphic designer in the rough and tumble world of New York City. And we started dating, and she was doing really well on Wall Street, and I was just barely surviving. But I was bold, and I asked her, I said, sweetheart, why don't we try to start a business together? Let's open an advertising agency in New York City on Madison Avenue. Let's go for it. She said, not so fast. I don't know who you really are, what you're really thinking here. Let's slow down, but let's put a plan together, and she started using her skills to help me organize mine. And it worked. And so we launched a business. Our very first client was the Long Island Railroad doing timetables. And God bless them. It wasn't very sexy, but it sure was paid the bills and was a wonderful client. We kept them for many, many years. So as we built our business, we realized that in many ways, we were giving away our best ideas in order to do production work. In order to get the cheapest kind of work, we were giving away our best ideas. And so we started thinking about that and said, there's got to be a better way. We're competing against tens of thousands of other advertising agencies. There's got to be a better way to build our business. And what we did is created something called corporate branding, which is really about branding the company, not necessarily just the products, but the whole company. And we became known for this. I started writing books. My first book was Marketing Corporate Image. The second was Leveraging the Corporate Brand, Branding Across Borders, the Best of Branding. And I became known as this guru of corporate branding. And as a result, we had clients coming to us, pitching us, wanting us to work with them. And we ended up really with a wonderful business that we ran for 40 years. We were working with the best blue chip clients in the world, companies like MasterCard and IBM and Ford Motor Company and Cisco Systems, just on, just wonderful, wonderful clients. And we had a great business. But 40 years is a long time. And we decided that it was probably time to do something else. And so we sold the business. This was back in 2013. Well, the harsh reality was as soon as I sold the business, I didn't have a backup plan of things to do. I hated golf, I tried other things and decided to go back and get a doctorate degree at the University of South Florida. I don't know why, but I just said, well, that'll keep me busy for a while. And my wife said, that great idea. Keep busy for a while. This will take care of you. This will give you a challenge. And it did. It almost killed me. 3 years of hard labor to get this doctorate, which I absolutely didn't use. But what it did do for me is it got me back into writing. It got me back into research and writing lots of articles and things that are required for the doctorate. And as a result of that, about 2018, I started writing for fun. And the first book that I wrote was right at the beginning of COVID. And I put this book together with my brothers. It was called Columbia the Street. And Columbia the Street was about, well, let me just show you. This is about growing up in a small town called Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I did it with my brothers. And this was our COVID project. This is a project we did to just to keep busy during COVID. And it was about growing up in a small town. That was great fun. And it got a lot of interest from people and sold pretty well. Well, then the next thing that came along is we decided to write our memoirs regarding the business, how my wife and I met, how we built the business, how we launched it, how we sustained it over time. And that is called Small Fortunes. And this is a trilogy of novellas, and they're all about my wife. And to your audience, I think this is really, and they might be interested in this because it tells the story of how we did it, how we managed to work through issues and problems, how we managed to build a concept, a business that could sustain itself. And we really had a lot of fun. And it also tells the story of the one time that I did not take my wife's advice. And that's called the fortune teller. And in fortune teller, my wife thought that I should not hire somebody that I really wanted to hire. And she told me why, and just didn't make any sense to me. I said, I'm going to hire this person. Well, we almost lost the business based on that. And she saved the day, and we survived, and the rest is history. But what a run, 40 years of working together. And the number one question I'm always asked is, how could you possibly work with your wife day in, day out, 24/7? And my answer has always been that the fact that every time I saw her in the office, whether it was passing in the hall or her sitting in her office or meeting with a client, I always had confidence in her as a person, as a friend, as my wife, as just 100% confidence that we were supporting each other. And that is the thing that really stands out in my mind. So, an important issue, I think, for many people who are in business and have thought about working with their spouses. It can work or it might not work. If it doesn't work, don't try to force it. But if it does work, it's a very powerful thing that works well and will help you survive.
Yeah. And, I even think like, even if you're not working together, just to have sort of an understanding of how a relationship should actually work, right? And how you can ebb and flow together as, you're the business person, she's the business person. I mean, it's all of that. So you've got a really great backstory. So that story, I want to draw a little bit on your branding insights and expertise, because when I think about a midlife woman or even a midlife man, at the end of the day, there's this point in time where we start to have to shift identities, right? We're letting go of a certain identity. You let go of the business and then thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I didn't really have a plan, which I think a lot of people don't have a plan. And I don't think everybody likes to hit the golf course either. So that was so nice to hear, actually. My question really is from a branding perspective, because you weren't branding products, you were branding companies. And I think there's still some fundamental aspects of that can help a person shift identities from whether it's been this long time parent, where now the kids have moved out, maybe they've had a death, maybe they're looking after, sick parents, maybe they've been retired, maybe a little bit too early. How do they shift their identities? Even if they don't have a business, what kind of, I guess, fundamentals from a branding perspective could we pull from your expertise?
That's such a great question. And you would think that somebody who was involved for 40 years in building corporate brands for major companies would be able to say that his own brand is very clear. And it's not. It's not an easy thing to do, especially as you evolve as a person. I went from a business owner where I knew my audience and they knew me, and we were very locked in together in terms of the kind of services we provided and the way we provided our culture, our history, all those things were very, very strong. And then all of a sudden, I'm an author. I mean, I was an author of nonfiction books, of business books, and I was well known for those books. But then suddenly I'm an author of fiction. And it was a different ball game. It's an entirely different ball game. I had to create a new brand for my novels and for my fiction writing. And it has taken some time. I've been doing this since 2018. I've written a number of different fiction books. Getting traction is slow, and it's like rebuilding a corporate brand for an individual. So how do you do that? You really have to assess where you are, where you're planning to go, what makes you comfortable, what makes you unique, and what are your strengths that you can leverage in a brand. And in my books, there's a look, there's a I'm
Yeah.
brand on purpose, and they all have a look, they all have a feeling. My name is Dr. James R. Gregory because I can't use it any other way. So I decided to put it as my writing name. Uh, and and then we come up with a new plan, a plan for marketing these books. I work with a publisher and called Morgan James, and they're a wonderful organization. I'm meeting with the CEO on Friday to talk about my new plans. So it's really important to treat yourself as a business and make sure that you hold yourself accountable. If you have a plan and it doesn't work, don't stay with the plan no matter what. Be willing to back off or to change direction if it's not working to your satisfaction.
For anybody who's just listening to the podcast, the books have a very similar identity, like treatment, I guess, if you will. And so I guess that's what you're saying is that when you're out there building this identity, it is like, what is your voice? You probably, I mean, the one book that I do want to hone in on is the Killer App book, but all of your books probably have a very similar voice, a similar tone. And I think, lots of people are doing blogs and writing and maybe starting podcasts. For me, I know that I try to go as unscripted as possible on my podcast. I do a pre-call that's good enough to like get to know each other. But then, the identity, the treatments of all my icons and things like that. So that's kind of what you're saying is create that list of things that your strengths and stuff, and then try to find some sort of similarity and then keep that similarity, that vein throughout the whole thing and whatever you're doing.
One of the things we always said in our corporate branding side was you should always have clear, concise, and consistent communications. So clear, concise, consistent communications over time really makes a difference. That's the big aha. That's the big thing that really stays with people. If you're changing every week, it's just not good. It doesn't take.
Resonate. Yeah, no, that's really good. No, that's good. I was curious about that. So when you sat down to write the memoir, was your wife part of the
She had
collaboration?
Yeah, she had every opportunity to edit or to reject. She did not want her name on the cover or associated with it at all. She's very shy. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady in many ways, but I'm the front person. I'm the one that's
Yeah.
not doing rah rah, and she's quietly standing behind me. As a matter of fact, for this podcast, I asked if she just wanted to come in and say hello. Absolutely not. She says she's out working on her flower garden,
Yeah.
which is perfect. She's so wonderful.
I know that, and just the tone that you have, it's just nice to hear. So, okay, so let's jump into the one book that sort of prompted our pre-call, which is the Killer App book. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background story on that book? And then I've got some questions around that I want to ask you.
Okay, so Killer App. This is Killer App. And this is a story about artificial intelligence gone bad. I started writing it when there were just nonstop articles against artificial intelligence. All the potential disasters that could ever happen were being written about in every business article that I picked up. And I said, it can't be that bad. We're all getting used to things like Siri and Alexa. So how can it be so bad that people are panicked, absolutely panicked about it? So I took a 6-week course at MIT to better understand it. And one of the things that's really interesting, back in 1956, Dartmouth had a workshop to identify how machines can imitate intelligence if given enough data and direction. And this is called the Marvin Minsky subplot in the book. Marvin Minsky was one of those famous people who developed the beginnings of artificial intelligence. And so what I did was I said, well, what are all the issues? What are all the problems? And I wrote a book as if this person whose name is Bryce Bogle. He is a journalist at a family-owned media company. What if he faced all of those problems? How would he react in real life? And then what if he was being manipulated as he's experiencing these things, and not just by the artificial intelligence, but by the people who created the artificial intelligence? And it just so happens that his parents, his mother and father, were one of the original scientists that created this app called Amy, Artificial Intelligence Made Easy. So it's a complicated but interesting book, and it's a lot of fun. It's really pretty wild because Amy is very shy when the book begins, but she begins to grow confident. This artificial intelligence begins to gather more information and be able to understand not only Bryce, but his business, the family business, other competitive businesses, other sort of things like the ballet industry, which plays into this. And so as she's gathering endless amounts of information and being able to be smart on all these things, she also develops a conscience. And that conscience begins to play into the overall theme of the book. It's a fun book to read.
Yeah.
It's not a novella. It's a full novel, but it's fun. And there's a bonus book included called Artifacts, which is all about archaeology, which I also love.
When you're going through the book, even though it's a fiction book, you're still applying so much nonfiction to it. Like everything was just so relatable, and it actually started to make you think. There's a lot of people now that are using ChatGPT or AI, if you will, for kind of therapy, journaling prompts, emotional advice. And so what do you think that says about our relationship? Your book is almost a nonfiction book, really, when you think about it, because of this memory. If you're asking it a question about something specific, it will go and it will search everything you've talked about.
Artificial intelligence is going to change the way we live entirely. This is one of those 100% change that will be coming up. And someone said just recently, it's as profound as electricity to our society. It's that thin. And I do believe that to be the case. The way I look at it, it's simply a tool. It's a tool like many other tools that I've seen over the decades that I've been working. It's just another tool. It just happens to be really, really good and profound. It's just fun. It's just so much fun to see how good it is. Now, the problem is, are people going to use it to write books or to do other things? And there've got to be some rules, unwritten and written rules, as to how that's got to work. How that, should there be books allowed to be written purely by ChatGPT? I think they should change their name. GPT never rolls off the tongue very well. That's my old business.
There you go. Exactly. That needs a rebrand. So, okay, let me ask you a question then. So if you think that people are going to start to use it to write books, is it just mirroring back to us the emotional, like who we are, or is it actually taking some of your words and applying it to a more general perspective?
I think it's more the latter, but I think that we're going to have relationships with books and written material that is entirely different than what we've experienced ever in the past. It's coming. It's like a tidal wave, and you have to stay in front of it or you're going to get swamped by that tidal wave. And a lot of people will be crushed by it, but I think that if you keep an open mind and an awareness of what is real and what is coming from the artificial intelligence, it helps you to navigate. One of the neat things in our previous conversation where we were talking about this were the movies that came out years ago. First of all, like 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you haven't seen that lately, it's really worth renting and taking a look at it. It is phenomenal. And the other one that you had mentioned and I had completely forgotten about was Ex Machina, and it was 2014. That is Amy in this book. I mean, that whole image of that actress, the protagonist in the movie.
Her with Joaquin Phoenix. I thought about that one too. Do you think that it gives us advice though that is actually factual? If somebody was really struggling and they used AI as some sort of like, oh, what should I do? But doesn't recognize the impact of maybe that not being the right response could be it might not be very factual. It might be sort of ethically off base.
Artificial intelligence has not reached that level where it should be giving personal advice. It tried in my book, and I addressed that a little bit in the book, but I also showed how far off base you can be. It can derail, common sense. And you can't do that. And so I just don't know where that's going. I do believe it is going in that direction for sure, that you're going to get advice from it, whether you want it or not.
James, how do you get your ideas for books? Like if I'm thinking I'd like to do so I've got some time on my hands right now. A memoir might not be something that I want to do. I'd like to actually write a fiction book that is kind of a little bit more around fantasy or whatever, but how do I know what's sort of what's your process, I guess, for the next book? Because I know you have 4 more in the hopper right now, right?
I've got a full group. And what's interesting is my process is very simple because I have so many stories in my mind, things that I've experienced. 5-minute experience can spawn, 300-page novel.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a giant idea. It can be a small idea, but I think it's an idea. If you have an idea or a concept that is important to you, that repeats, that stays with you, that you think about often, that you think is important, that you think that you can write about and stick with for a long period of time. And the way I test that theory is when I do have one of those ideas, I will write a couple of sentences and stop. And then if the idea begins to develop in my mind, then I know I have something. If it doesn't, I just put it aside and say, well, that was not a complete waste of time. I might go back to that some future date, but right now it's not enough to turn me on to continue to write. But when I have something that really wants me to do more, it's asking me, it's pulling me in and saying, I want you to write more on this idea. Man, then it becomes natural. That was the killer app did that. I mean, I had that book in my mind. I had it figured out very quickly. Although I don't do what many authors do, which is create an outline and have the whole thing planned and then write to the outline. I don't do that. I write one sentence at a time and see where it goes. When I start, I don't often know where it's going to end up. It's kind of fun that way. It keeps me excited and moving.
Friend like that too. I don't think he does any outlines. I never asked him actually. He's stayed with me once down in Mexico for a month and he was just writing. He's like, yeah, I think what I'm going to do tomorrow is have her do this, this, and this. And I was just like, it was just really interesting because I was going to ask, what is your process for writing? I think sometimes you're right. Like, I think everybody has a little bit of a different way of doing it. I've interviewed quite a few authors on this podcast, and some do outlines. Some, as you say, just have this concept in their head and they just start writing. And it's just one little bit every day. And hey, listen, next thing you know, you've got 5,000 words and you're thinking, okay, I think there's a book here. And you might not even know the ending until the ending. Did you ever lean on any kind of writing communities? It sounds like you work with your publisher very closely. Who's your sort of bounce things off of each other?
I have a nice small group of people that I work with. There's a writers group that I really like a lot. We meet on Saturdays and share, where we are, a couple of chapters of where we were since the last time. That's always fun. I have other people who have been with me from the beginning and know my strengths and weaknesses. And one of the things I want to do is continuously improve my writing. I was not a great writer in high school or college, nor do I think I'm a great writer now, but I'm an entertaining writer. Yeah. I have fun writing. I write the kind of books that I want to read. And those are entertaining. They're uplifting. They're short, relatively short. I hate real long books. My books are the kind of books that you get on a plane, a 4 or 5 hour flight, and you're basically finished by the time you land, or a long weekend or a rainy weekend, that sort of thing, where you can read the whole thing and come away with a feel good experience. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, and I think that's totally relatable in this day and age when we've got such a, sort of attention span that's just almost nothing. To think like to pull out one of my books that's, 2 or 3 inches thick, I'm like, oh my God. I kind of get lost in it. So if you can captivate me right from the very beginning and I can zoom through it, that's exactly right. That's the killer app for sure. And a couple of other stuff that you've got written. So what are the next? What's in the pipeline next? Because you have, as I think we mentioned, 4 books in the pipeline.
Yeah, it was Zephyr's War. This was the first of four books. This came out last summer, and it's about the war in Ukraine and the capitalists versus the communists, basically the concept. And fits in that category. Fast read, interesting, uplifting, a good ending, really an ending that you won't believe. The Ghost Town is about a city. It's a historical fiction. It's based on flood in Pennsylvania, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, called the Great Flood. And it happened in 1889. And that book is about that, the events that led up to the flood, the dam bursting, and the people who tried to stop the flood from happening. The original concept for that happened when I was 10 years old, and my dad and I went to a coal mine, and he was to get a load of coal in his pickup truck. And that experience of this young man who was my age invited me to go into the coal mine with him. It freaked me out. Freaked me out. I walked in 10 feet and it just like never. And I was out of there. But this story was spawned in that moment when I was 10 years old. That is in production right now. That will come out in January of 2026. The book that I'm actually working on right now the working title is Blue Moon. I'm working every day on that one, and I'm already at 40,000 words.
So when somebody is doing the writing and they may not have sort of access to a publisher like you do, what would you say to somebody? Let's say, and I'm asking this question because I have a niece that has a book full of poetry that she's written, and now she wants to get it published. And so now that just becomes like super overwhelming. How do I even get started? Where do I go? How do I publish it? Can I publish it myself? What would you say to that person?
Well, years ago, that would be very difficult to answer. You would have to hire a graphic designer and build a program to make it happen, find a printer, find a graphic design organization who would produce it. These days, it's much easier. Amazon is particularly good. They have a whole system for helping first-time authors. And now you'll have a book at the end, but you might not have a marketing program around it. So then you go back to Amazon or others like Barnes and Noble also can do this to a degree. But Amazon is really, really well geared for it. And they will help you get this thing published and market it. There are other publishers. One is called Bestseller Publishing. I've worked with them, and Columbia the Street was one of the books that I did through a bestseller, and they guarantee that you'll have a bestseller. It's to a very small audience, to a very narrow audience, but it's a pretty cool idea. So
Yeah.
they do charge. I mean, it's not a free service. They do charge, but they'll help you through the first time author through the process.
Okay, that's great. That's good. I would not have known that. I did know about the Amazon side of it. So, James, what's next for you?
Well, I have a lot of ideas. One of the things that I'm working on is games we played as children. It is a nonfiction book, and basically what I'm doing is taking stories that people relate to with their childhood and how they now today play with their grandchildren. Are their grandchildren, when my grandchildren come over to our house and immediately pull out the iPad and start working on that and have a good time, but they're not interacting with us. And so my idea is to recreate the games that we played as children, and by asking people what they did as children, what kind of games they played. everyone that I've interviewed so far just smiles. They just say, "Oh my, when I had such a great time as a child, I did so many things. I loved playing with my friends outside and all the games they play." Well, the problem I have with that is trying to find a sponsor for it. I need a real sponsor, somebody, a reason for the book. And I've got the book, I've got the contents, but I need the sponsor. And so that's what I'm working on right now, in addition to writing my
Your other 4 books? Yeah, no, that's good, that's good. Actually, I think about that too, like, what games did we play when we were little? Like, just the basic games, but they were fun, and they were outside, and they weren't, brain numbing kind of stuff, marbles, like, I love playing marbles.
Oh God, I loved marbles. You know what? That's a good one. You-
We used to have these little competitions, like, outside at recess, and somebody would have their big marble at the end, and whoever hit the marble would win the marble, and they were the marble champion. I think I won a couple of times there too. So just a little bit of trivia there for you. So listen, James, thank you so much for being on the show today. I think it's amazing to see the reinvention. You talked about, being humble during the reinvention. And I think everybody just needs to take that as a lesson. And you know that your identities are going to change. Keep growing. It's going to be kind of uncomfortable, but at the end, it all, you're producing some great novels now. So thank you.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
My pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.